Welcome to Draw This. Draw This is a series of videos where I'll randomly generate a word and then draw it for you while describing my process so that you, the viewer, can follow along. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm on somecallmebeth.com and she has a really nice art idea generator. I think it's pretty fun to do these now and then. A large bird holding a bag of groceries is our idea, so we'll go ahead and draw that with Corel Painter 2015. I'm going to create a new canvas here. Let's choose one of these presets and let's do 11 by 14 at 300 dpi. And I'm just going to do this in kind of a cartoon style. I'm going to create a new layer for my sketch. This will help me plot out everything. I'm just going to pick a dark gray. You could choose from this value scale here. You could choose like a 5 if you want. I'm going to use the detail oils brush for my sketch. And I'm just going to start sketching in a seagull. Now if you want, you can go ahead and get a reference photo of a seagull. I'm not going to pull one up here because I don't want to get in any trouble for using somebody's photo, and I don't happen to have any seagull photos of my own. Drawing in a guide here for the eyes to help me place them. Draw a guide down the center of the face. You notice I'm just drawing the volumes here. This is the primitive shape for the body. This is a primitive shape to represent the head. We'll have a beak kind of come out from here like so. I'm not going to go for a hyper-realistic drawing here. This will just be a cartoon, but it's always good to plot things out to get things in proportion. We'll have some wings. Just going to draw the top line for those. And there's going to be a tail that kind of fans out. Maybe we'll do the legs first here so we know where to put everything. The legs to look a little bent. Now I don't know that seagulls can actually carry a bag of groceries with their feet, but we're just going to say that they can in this drawing. It's going to indicate where the feet would be. I'm not going to worry about drawing them in super detailed at this point. And then we'll do our tail. And we'll have the bags of groceries. This will be like plastic bags so that it's clear that they're bags. And maybe we'll have some stuff kind of sticking out like a pineapple or something so that we know that they're bags of groceries. A little box sticking out or something too. And we'll go ahead and finish off the wings. Now if you notice that you didn't quite do everything in proportion and you filled up too much of your canvas, which I tend to do quite often, since you have that sketch on a new layer, you can go ahead and transform that. So we can choose free transform, and if you hold shift, everything will stay in proportion. You'll just scale that down and then go ahead and zoom back into that and finish it up. Something like that looks a little bit better to me. I'm just going to draw the front edge of the wings here. Then everything else under here will be feathers. These will be all pretty big feathers. Really, this is just a guide for what you're going to do. You're not worrying about having a finished drawing at this point. You're just plotting it out. And you can do as many layers of sketches as you want. For instance, I could add another layer and call this sketch 2. Turn down the opacity of the first sketch, and then go over it another time and just refine it a little more, make it look a little more clean and a little more closer to the finished drawing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of these by holding shift, and I'm going to do Control E to merge them together, and we'll just rename it to sketch. So now that we have a pretty decent sketch, let's go ahead and ink over that on a new layer. Create a new layer and call it ink, and I'm going to use this rough ink brush. I like the way this looks. I'm going to choose black. And I'm going to zoom in pretty close so that I can do a nice clean drawing here. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the head. That's the most interesting area. Sketch in the eyes. I want this to look a little cartoony. This brush works really well because it has a lot of variability to its edge. Some of these brushes, these digital brushes, have a habit of looking too digital and too perfect, and this particular brush works well to look a little more organic when you draw with it. Add a little nostril here. And we'll go ahead and indicate the body. It's up to you how detailed of a drawing you want to do and what kind of style you want to use. Sometimes I do really detailed drawings in these videos, and sometimes I do simple drawings, and that's because I want there to be variety for everybody, because not everybody likes to draw the same thing in the same style. And personally, I don't like to either. I like to have lots of variety and draw all kinds of different things. I feel like this series especially has challenged me to do that, just to expand and draw things that I wouldn't have normally drawn before. And again, I have a reference image that I'm looking at. It's just an image that I found on Google Image Search. Since I'm changing it quite a bit, I'm not worried about copyright infringement, but I don't want to show the picture because that's someone else's photo, and I don't have their permission to use it, so I'm going to respect that. I recommend that if you're making videos or you're making artwork, try to get people's permission if you're going to use their photos, because they will get upset if they see that you use their work. There's, certain rules that can be bent, like this, for instance. This isn't a direct copy of the photo. I'm obviously making it look more like a cartoon, so chances are that person's not going to recognize that this is their photo. And it is a pretty generic photo. There are photos you can get if you do searches for public domain photos. Those are free to use. And you have to really verify that they are public domain. There's Creative Commons photos, and there's lots of different free photos that you can get. And for something like a seagull or a bird, it wouldn't be that hard to just go outside and get your camera and take a picture of your own bird. There are plenty of seagulls where I live, so it wouldn't be hard to get a picture of one. But I didn't happen to know that I was going to do a seagull today, so didn't have an opportunity to plan ahead. Just indicate some more feathers here. And the feet. Now this is going to be tricky because seagulls have webbed feet, so I don't know that they really work very well for grabbing bags, so I'm just going to more or less try to indicate some kind of grabbing of a bag. It's going to be tricky. Maybe it's just wrapped around its feet like that. And we'll have some stuff sticking out like some produce. That's that bag hanging. Add some contour to the bottom of it like there's something kind of polygonal inside of it. Like a box of cereal or something like that. Go ahead and do this other webbed foot here. Since this is a cartoon, I don't have to stress about doing everything super detailed. That's kind of nice. Alright, so hopefully those will read as grocery bags. I'm going to go ahead and scan this and give it a once over and make sure there's nothing else that I really need to add. Maybe we'll give the wings a little more detail here. Having a lot of room to draw is nice too. You'll notice I'm working on this Cintiq 24 HD, so I can see the screen and I can also really move my hand around. Those little teeny tiny tablets aren't so good to work on because you're limited to a little square. It's like trying to draw on an envelope. So we can go ahead and turn our sketch off by clicking on the eyeball and evaluate our drawing. I think that looks pretty good. And let's go ahead and add some color now to this. We'll create a new layer, we'll move it below the ink, and we'll call it Color 1. And we'll go ahead and fill this in using the scratchboard tool because it has a little bit smoother of an edge. Now you can pick whatever colors you want. I'm going to go ahead and fill the background with a color first. So let's go down to the canvas layer. Let's pick a sky blue, choose fill. I think we want something a little bit lighter, so I'm going to shift it. That will work. Now we'll be able to see white when we fill it in, and that will be our first color that we'll choose. We'll choose white, and we'll go ahead and fill this in. Now I like to just paint along the edge pretty quick, I'm not going to worry about getting it right in the line there because it's pretty easy to erase or smudge things around. But I'm not going to go too far out of the line because that's just going to create more work. So it's up to you how sloppy you want to be. I'm just focusing on the white part of the bird. So mainly just everything but the legs and the groceries. So you'll notice I went around the edge, that way I can go through with a big brush. Just fill in the center of that. Make sure you get everything there. You don't leave any empty spaces. And then you can zoom in. And there's a number of different brushes you can use. I'm going to use the pinch brush to clean up anywhere where I overpainted by just painting along the line to pull the pixels in towards the center of the brush. Down here where there's these little feathers, I'm not going to do that yet because that's going to work better with a different brush. Just painting back and forth along the black line. That's pulling that white paint towards the brush. Look down here, clean that up a little bit. This is sometimes faster than erasing and repainting, I find. So that's why I like these brushes. It's not the most intuitive way to paint, but it is efficient. Now if you think it's easier, you could also just use the scratch board to be really careful and just paint it in. You can use your eraser. It's up to you. I don't like having to flip the pen like that, so I don't really use the eraser that often. You can also hit N on your keyboard. That'll switch to your eraser tool, and B will switch back to your brush. Won't worry about filling in the beak there because that's going to be on a separate layer because it'll be a separate color. It's good to keep your colors separate as well as overlapping objects. We'll create a new layer. Let's call it beak. I'm going to pick a beak color, something like that. I'm going to go ahead and fill in the beak. Now you can break this up however you want. If you want to include other things on that beak layer, you can, as long as they're not overlapping. So we could put the legs on that layer too, if you want to. Pick kind of a appropriate leg color here. Now if you decide that maybe you don't like these colors here, you can always change them after the fact. It's probably better that you keep similar colors on the same layer, that way you can change them together pretty easily. But in this case, I know I'm not going to have to really change the color much, so I'm not going to worry about it. And let's go ahead and create a new layer. Let's call it bags, and let's go ahead and pick a color for the bags. We'll go ahead and use white. Alright, let's create another layer. Let's call it Groceries. We'll just do GROC as an abbreviation because there's no reason to spell it out really. All you need to know is what the layer is. Add some green here for our produce. And pick kind of a pineapple color. Maybe we'll imply that that's a pineapple in there. We'll use red for a box of cereal. Maybe pick another color that's kind of bright. We might use for grocery packaging. We'll use a blue-gray like this to fill in the inside of the bag. And on that bags layer, let's go ahead and clean that up. I'm going to hit N on my keyboard and just use the eraser to clean up that little bit there. Let's scroll up a little bit. Let's go ahead and add some detail to the eyes. Let's do that on the beak layer. Let's call this beak, legs, eyes. So now we know what's on that layer. Let's choose a brown for the seagull's eyes. And let's go to this color layer. Let's just call this white now that we know what it is. Let's make a selection of that layer. That way, if we want to add some other colors to this, they'll stay within that area that we've already painted. We don't have to go through all the trouble of staying in between these lines again. So on that white layer, choose Select Layer Content, and then we'll create a new layer. Let's call this Dark. You want to hide the selection by doing Show Hide Marquee. Then we'll choose the scratch board, and let's choose a gray color. Let's make it a little bit blue like that sky, so like a blue-gray like this. Something like that looks good, maybe a little bit darker. And we'll add some dark area to this seagull here. Now if you accidentally overpaint anything, you can just switch to your eraser, like I did on the wing here, and erase some of that dark. And you could even use it here on the feathers too to create some nice definition. Let's add another layer of color between the dark and the white. Let's call it mid. This will be a mid-tone. Let's choose kind of a medium gray like that. And we're just going to fill in this area here. It's really up to you how many colors you want to use. Let's add some of that to the body here. Let's create another layer. Let's call this blue. Let's sample the sky color holding Alt. Choose a blue-gray. It's a little bit lighter. Use this all around here. Really just blocking in the color at this point because we're going to go through and blend it a little bit. Go ahead and do the bottom of these wings. This is the sky color kind of reflecting onto the shadow that's underneath the wing. The light's coming from above the bird, so you want there to be a sense of shadow. Well, let's go ahead and deselect that selection by doing Select None. We'll go to the grocery bags layer, turn on Preserve Transparency, and select a light blue like so. Add some detail and shadows to those. For things that are white, neutral colors, you always want to have some influence from the environment color. And we'll put in a little more white along the bottom. I think that looks pretty good. Let's go to the beak layer, and let's sample this color from the beak. Let's make it lighter and more yellow. We'll add some highlights to that. Add some detail to the eyes so they stand out a little bit more using a lighter orange. And we'll sample the color for the feet. Give those some highlights as well. Doesn't take much to make stuff look three-dimensional. You just have to add a few layers of shading. Pick a darker color here. Add some darkness. Let's zoom out a little bit. And let's work on our sky to give it some definition. I'm going to select the airbrush and a blue, more indigo blue, kind of like this. It's a big airbrush. Just going to paint right across the top and fade that down towards the bottom. Zoom back in. I think that looks better. Now we can go ahead and start blending some of this. Let's select the dark layer, turn off Preserve Transparency, hold Shift, select the white layer. This is pretty much all of the colors from the bird's body. We'll do Control E. We'll rename that layer Body. This is now all of the color for the body, excluding the beak and the leg and the eyes. And we can blend that using a variety of brushes. Let's try Coarse Oily Blender and see what that does. Now depending on what kind of paper texture you have here, you're going to get a different result. These settings affect that as well. So I'm using basic paper with these two settings turned up. Just going to smudge my color around a little bit to make it look more organic. Do that here on the bird's body as well. And you can use the diffuse blur if you want a softer blend. And we'll do that here on the body. Let's turn on Preserve Transparency. Let's select the airbrush. Hold Alt to sample this white. And let's fade that out a little bit. Let's add some more shadow to the bottom of the tail. Let's sample this darker color that we used here. Add some more shadow to the underside. That should be a little bit darker. Like so. Maybe we'll sample some of this lighter color and put it just right along the edge, just to help that pop out more. And now I'm just going to finish everything up, tighten up a few details, and we can call this a finished piece. Alright, so I think that'll do it for this piece. We have a bird carrying bags of groceries. If you enjoyed this episode of Draw This, take a quick second to like this video and share it with your friends on YouTube and on Facebook. And don't forget to click the subscribe button to see more episodes of Draw This as they're released. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Tuesday for another episode of Draw This.